In the vast reaches of space, amidst the countless stars and planets, there existed a prison like no other. It was a fortress of steel and stone, carved into the barren rock of a distant planet. The air was thick with the weight of despair, a place where hope had long been forgotten. This was not a prison for the weak or the foolish. This was a place reserved for those who had committed the most grievous of offenses, the most dangerous of beings in the galaxy. And among them, there was one who did not belong. He was human, a species often regarded as primitive and fragile by the more advanced civilizations of the galaxy. Yet, this particular human was far from ordinary. A covert operative, trained in the art of infiltration and survival, he had been captured during a reconnaissance mission deep within enemy territory. His mission was to gather intelligence on a powerful alien race, a species known for their ruthlessness and technological superiority. They were a race that had dominated countless worlds, their empire stretching across the stars. The aliens had been hunting him for weeks, their advanced sensors and relentless patrols pushing him to the brink. But he had evaded them, slipping through their grasp time and again, until finally, they cornered him on a desolate moon. It had taken the combined efforts of an entire fleet to capture him, a testament to his skill and determination. But in the end, he was just one man, and the odds had been too great. He was brought to the prison in shackles, the alien guards jeering at him as they escorted him through the cold, metal corridors. They spoke in their guttural language, mocking the frailty of his species, confident that this human was no different from the others they had crushed underfoot. The guards were towering beings, their bodies encased in heavy armor, their eyes glowing with a sinister light. They had no fear of this small, pale creature in their custody. The prison itself was a marvel of alien engineering, designed to contain the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy. The cells were reinforced with energy fields that could withstand even the most powerful weapons, and the walls were lined with sensors that monitored every movement, every breath. Escape was impossible, at least, that's what the aliens believed. The facility was located on a remote planet, far from any inhabited systems, surrounded by a barren wasteland where no life could survive. The prisoners were cut off from the outside world, left to rot in their cells, forgotten by the galaxy. The human was thrown into a cell, the door slamming shut behind him with a resounding thud. The air was stale, the only light coming from the faint glow of the energy field that kept him confined. The walls were bare, the floor cold and unforgiving. It was a place designed to break even the strongest of wills. But the human did not break. He had been trained for situations like this, conditioned to endure the unendurable. He knew that panic and despair were his greatest enemies, and he refused to succumb to them. Days turned into weeks, the monotony of imprisonment wearing down even the hardiest of souls. The guards grew bored of him, their initial curiosity fading as they realized he would not provide them with any entertainment. He was just another prisoner, another life to be snuffed out by the endless march of time. But the human observed them, every word, every gesture, every routine. He was always watching, always waiting. The aliens had underestimated him. They had seen only his physical form, not the mind that lay within. They had assumed that he was just another weak and helpless human, incapable of posing any real threat. They did not understand the resilience of his species, the determination that had allowed humanity to survive and thrive in a galaxy filled with dangers. The human knew that his only chance of survival was to escape, but escape from this place seemed impossible. The prison was a fortress, and he was a lone man against an empire. But he had faced impossible odds before, and he knew that the key to victory was patience and preparation. He began to formulate a plan, piecing together the fragments of information he had gathered during his time in the cell. The guards' routines, the layout of the prison, the weaknesses in the security systems, everything was analyzed and catalogued in his mind. The conditions of the prison were harsh, designed to break the spirit of the inmates. The food was scarce and barely edible, the water tainted with chemicals that left a bitter aftertaste. The temperature was kept just above freezing, forcing the prisoners to huddle in their thin clothing for warmth. The guards were brutal, administering beatings for the slightest infractions, their cruelty knowing no bounds. But the human endured, his resolve unshaken. He knew that his time would come. As the days passed, the human remained silent, his eyes never leaving the guards as they patrolled the corridors. He could see the arrogance in their posture, the way they carried themselves with the confidence of those who believed they were invincible. They did not realize that they were being studied, that every action they took was being analyzed for weaknesses. The human's quiet determination was a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of the prison, a flame that refused to be extinguished. He waited, biding his time, knowing that his opportunity would come. The aliens may have captured him, but they had not broken him. And when the moment came, he would be ready. The prison ran like clockwork. Every day, the alien guards followed their meticulously planned routines, confident in the impenetrability of their fortress. Each cell was checked at precisely the same time, and the inmates knew better than to cause trouble. The guards, towering and heavily armed, patrolled the corridors with a sense of superiority, their belief in their technology unshakable. The human prisoner was no exception. To them, he was just another inmate, powerless and insignificant, trapped in a cell that no one had ever escaped. The day started like any other. The guards moved through the cell blocks, their footsteps echoing in the cold, sterile halls. They approached the human's cell with the same indifference they had shown since his arrival, expecting to see him sitting in the corner, as he always did, silent and still. But as they peered through the energy field, they were met with an empty cell. The human was gone. At first, there was disbelief. The guard blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again, convinced that he had made a mistake. But the cell remained empty. The energy field was still active, the door securely locked. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence that the human had forced his way out. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Panic quickly spread among the guards. They shouted orders, their voices tinged with fear and confusion, as they scrambled to understand what had happened. The alarm was raised, a blaring siren that echoed throughout the prison, signaling the highest level of emergency. The prisoners in the other cells watched in stunned silence as the usually composed guards descended into chaos. The prison officials were summoned immediately, their faces pale as they reviewed the security footage. Every camera, every sensor showed the same thing, the human sitting in his cell one moment, and then nothing. There was no indication of how he had escaped, no malfunction in the energy field, no breach in the security systems. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. The shock among the guards was palpable. They had never imagined that a mere human could outwit them, could disappear from a cell that was supposed to be inescapable. Their confidence in their technology, once unshakable, was now shattered. They questioned each other, searching for answers, but none could explain the impossible. How could a human, a species they considered inferior, achieve something no other being in the galaxy had ever done? The investigation began immediately. Every guard, every official, was interrogated. The prison was placed on lockdown, and a thorough search of the facility was conducted. The guards moved methodically from cell to cell, from corridor to corridor, searching for any sign of the human. But there was nothing. No clues, no trace of where he might have gone. It was as if he had simply vanished from the face of the planet. The prison's command center became a hive of activity, with officials poring over data, analyzing every second of footage, every sensor reading. They replayed the moment of the human's disappearance over and over again, hoping to catch something they had missed, but the result was always the same, an empty cell. They began to question whether the human had received outside help. Perhaps there was a traitor among the guards, someone who had deactivated the security systems or provided him with the tools to escape. But every lead they followed led to a dead end. As the hours passed, the tension within the prison grew. The guards, once so confident in their superiority, now looked over their shoulders, paranoid that they had overlooked something. The idea that a human could escape their grasp was unthinkable, yet the evidence was undeniable. The prison was a fortress, designed to be impenetrable, yet a prisoner had disappeared without a trace. How could this have happened? What had they missed? The officials knew that this incident would have far-reaching consequences. News of the escape would spread, and the galaxy would question the competence of the alien race that had prided itself on its technological prowess. The very idea that a human could outsmart them was a blow to their pride, an affront to their belief in their own superiority. The search continued, growing more desperate with each passing hour. The guards tore apart the prison, dismantling walls, scanning every inch of the facility with advanced sensors. But the human was nowhere to be found. The more they searched, the more they realized that the escape had been planned with precision, executed flawlessly. This was no accident, no stroke of luck. The human had outmaneuvered them, had used their own arrogance against them. As the sun set on the desolate planet, the prison officials were left with more questions than answers. They had underestimated their prisoner, had assumed that he was just another human, weak and easily contained. But now they were forced to confront the possibility that they were wrong. The human had vanished, leaving behind nothing but fear and doubt in the minds of those who had once believed themselves invincible. The news spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. What started as a contained incident within the prison soon became the topic of discussion across the galaxy. A human had escaped from what was considered the most secure prison in existence, and that fact alone sent shockwaves through the interconnected systems of alien empires. The escape was no longer just a prison break, it was a crisis of unimaginable proportions. Governments scrambled to control the narrative, but the story had already taken on a life of its own. Rumors and half-truths mingled with the facts, creating a sense of chaos and uncertainty. On every planet, in every city, beings of all species whispered about the human who had done the impossible. What kind of power could a human possess to evade the most advanced security systems in the galaxy? The fear was palpable, and it was spreading like wildfire. In the halls of power, alien leaders convened emergency meetings, their usual calm demeanor replaced with visible anxiety. This wasn't just a matter of a single human disappearing, it was a direct challenge to the perceived invincibility of their rule. Each empire reacted differently, but the underlying emotion was the same: fear. The humans' escape represented a breach in the fabric of their control, and they couldn't afford to ignore it. Some empires immediately went on high alert, their military forces mobilized in response to what they now perceived as a potential human threat. Defensive measures were increased tenfold, borders were locked down, and fleets were positioned in key sectors. Even the most distant colonies, those believed to be safe from any possible danger, were fortified. The idea that a single human could cause such a response might have seemed absurd before, but now it was reality. Theories about the escape began to circulate among the leaders. Some speculated that humans had developed new, unknown technologies, devices or abilities that allowed them to bypass even the most sophisticated systems. Others feared that this was not an isolated incident, but the beginning of a coordinated effort by humanity, perhaps in league with other powerful species. The possibility of an alliance between humans and another advanced race was particularly concerning, as it could tip the balance of power in ways that had not been anticipated. Diplomatic channels buzzed with activity, as governments sought reassurances and tried to gauge the intentions of their neighbors. Trust, already a scarce commodity among the various alien species, became even more elusive. Every empire suspected the others of knowing more than they let on, of perhaps even being complicit in the humans' escape. Alliances that had been stable for centuries now seemed fragile, as leaders questioned the loyalty and intentions of their supposed allies. Meanwhile, the populations of these empires were not immune to the growing panic. The story of the humans' escape was on everyone's lips, fueling a sense of dread that permeated even the most remote worlds. People began to fear that this human, or others like him, could infiltrate their own planets, their own homes. Paranoia set in, with neighbors turning against each other, accusing one another of harboring humans or sympathizing with them. Security measures were tightened across the board. In every major city, surveillance was increased, checkpoints were established, and citizens were subjected to invasive searches. The empires couldn't afford any more breaches, and they were willing to sacrifice personal freedoms in the name of security. Military forces patrolled the streets, a visible reminder of the fear that had taken hold. No one was above suspicion, and no measure was too extreme. The more draconian empires took even harsher steps. Some began rounding up any known or suspected human sympathizers, imprisoning them without trial. Others initiated brutal crackdowns on planets with significant human populations, justifying their actions as necessary for the greater good. The fear of humans had become a tool for these governments to exert even greater control over their people, exploiting the crisis to further their own agendas. But even as these measures were implemented, there was a growing sense of unease among the ruling classes. The humans' escape had exposed weaknesses in their systems, vulnerabilities they had never acknowledged. It wasn't just about one man disappearing from a prison, it was about what that disappearance represented. It was a reminder that no matter how powerful their empires were, they were not invincible. There were forces in the galaxy that they could not fully understand, let alone control. The panic continued to spread, unchecked by the measures taken by the governments. Every new rumor, every piece of speculation, only added to the fear. The idea that a human could achieve such a feat shattered the arrogance of the alien empires, forcing them to confront the possibility that they had underestimated humanity. And in that underestimation lay their greatest fear, that this was just the beginning, and that humanity had far more surprises in store. The galaxy had been thrown into turmoil by the actions of a single human, and the consequences of that turmoil were only beginning to unfold. The alien empires, once so secure in their power, now found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew. The humans' escape was more than just a prison break, it was a spark that threatened to ignite a galaxy-wide inferno. The alien empires wasted no time in organizing a response. The hunt for the escaped human became the highest priority, with vast resources being mobilized to track him down. Elite intelligence units, comprised of the best trackers and spies from across the galaxy, were dispatched with one mission: locate the human, no matter the cost. These operatives, trained in the art of subterfuge and equipped with cutting-edge technology, scoured every corner of the galaxy. They analyzed every scrap of data, followed every lead, and interrogated every informant who might have information. At first, the search seemed promising. Reports came in from various sectors, each claiming to have spotted the human or uncovered clues to his whereabouts. But as the forces followed these leads, they quickly realized they were chasing shadows. Every time they thought they were closing in, the humans slipped away, leaving nothing behind but confusion and frustration. What they couldn't understand was how he was able to stay ahead of them, how he seemed to anticipate their every move. The human had learned to exploit the very technology that was supposed to capture him. He knew how the aliens thought, how they relied on their advanced systems to track and monitor. He understood their psychology, their methods, and he used that knowledge to his advantage. He fed them false information, led them into traps, and created diversions that sent them in the wrong direction. The more the aliens pressed their search, the more tangled their efforts became. As the hunt dragged on, paranoia began to set in. The aliens started to question everything. How could a single human outmaneuver entire fleets, entire intelligence networks? Was he working alone, or was there a network of human operatives assisting him? Doubt and suspicion grew among the ranks, with some beginning to believe that their own people might be compromised. Every failed attempt to capture the human only deepened their mistrust of each other. This mistrust spilled over into the relationships between the alien empires. Alliances that had been forged over centuries were now under strain. Each empire feared that the human might be hiding within their borders, that their neighbors might be harboring him or using the situation to their own advantage. Diplomatic channels, once filled with pleasantries and formalities, now bristled with accusations and threats. The empires began to withhold information from one another, each fearing that the other might use it against them. The human's ability to stay one step ahead was not just a testament to his skill but also a demonstration of the adaptability that had allowed humanity to survive and thrive in a hostile galaxy. He understood that brute force would not win this battle. Instead, it was his resourcefulness, his ability to think outside the box, that kept him free. He used the aliens' own strengths against them, turning their advanced technology into a weakness. Every time the aliens thought they had him cornered, he found a way out. When they tightened security, he slipped through unnoticed. When they blocked one path, he created another. The more they tried to trap him, the more elusive he became. It was as if he was always one step ahead, always anticipating their next move. This only fueled the growing paranoia among the aliens, as they began to suspect that the human might be more than just a lone operative. Some even whispered that he might have access to technology beyond their understanding, perhaps even something that could challenge their dominance. The tension between the empires reached a breaking point. Minor skirmishes broke out along borders, sparked by misunderstandings and the fear that the human might be using one empire's territory to strike at another. Diplomatic relations, already strained, began to fracture completely. Alliances were tested as each empire sought to protect its own interests, even at the cost of long-standing partnerships. Amidst this chaos, the human continued to evade capture. His presence became a ghost story, a tale whispered in the corridors of power and in the back alleys of distant worlds. He had become more than just a fugitive. He was a symbol of everything the alien empires feared: unpredictability, resilience, and the possibility that their dominance might not be as secure as they once believed. The hunt had become a game of cat and mouse on a galactic scale, with the human always managing to stay just out of reach. And with every failed attempt to capture him, the alien empires were left more divided, more paranoid, and more fearful of what might come next. The tension in the galaxy had reached a boiling point, and it was clear that something would have to give. But whether it would be the human, the empires, or the fragile peace that held the galaxy together, no one could say. After weeks of relentless pursuit, the aliens finally managed to corner the human. He was trapped in an abandoned outpost on a remote moon, surrounded on all sides by heavily armed forces. The aliens moved in with precision, confident that they had finally captured their elusive prey. This time, they left no room for error. Every escape route was blocked, every possibility of evasion accounted for. They had him. As they closed in, the human made no attempt to flee. Instead, he stood calmly, almost as if he had been expecting this moment. The alien commanders, eager to assert their dominance, demanded to know how he had managed to evade them for so long. But the human's response was not what they anticipated. With a steady voice, he revealed that his escape was not an accident or a desperate bid for freedom, but part of a carefully orchestrated plan. Every move he had made since his disappearance had been deliberate, every step calculated to achieve a specific goal. His mission had never been about escape, it had been about gathering intelligence. The human explained how he had used the pursuit to study the alien empires from within, to understand their weaknesses, their fears, and their vulnerabilities. He had used the chase to probe their defenses, to see how they would react under pressure, and to identify the cracks in their seemingly impenetrable systems. The entire galaxy-wide hunt had been a distraction, a way to make the aliens reveal their hand. The aliens listened in stunned silence as the human continued. He described how he had spread misinformation, sowed discord among the empires, and turned their own paranoia against them. Every false lead, every moment of confusion, had been part of his plan to destabilize the galactic power structure. He had taken advantage of their arrogance, their belief in their own superiority, to manipulate them into a state of fear and mistrust. The empires had been so focused on capturing him that they hadn't realized they were playing directly into his hands. It was then that the aliens began to grasp the full extent of what had happened. The human's disappearance had been a masterstroke, a calculated move designed to throw the galaxy into chaos. The panic that had spread, the alliances that had fractured, the military forces that had been mobilized, it had all been orchestrated by this one man. And now, standing before them, he laid bare the consequences of their underestimation. The realization hit the aliens with a force they had not anticipated. They had believed themselves to be invincible, their technology and power unmatched in the galaxy. But this human had shown them how fragile their dominance truly was. In their arrogance, they had overlooked the possibility that a single individual could challenge the status quo, could unravel the very fabric of their control. And now, it was too late to undo the damage. The aftermath of the human's revelation was immediate and profound. The galaxy, already teetering on the edge, plunged further into turmoil. The empires, once so confident in their superiority, were left questioning everything they thought they knew. Their unity, their strength, their very identities had been shaken to the core. The seeds of doubt and fear that the human had planted were now growing, spreading through the ranks of their governments and military forces. Diplomatic relations between the empires deteriorated rapidly. Trust, already eroded by weeks of paranoia, was now all but non-existent. Each empire feared that the others might have been complicit in the humans' plan, or worse, that they might have similar plans of their own. The fragile alliances that had held the galaxy together for centuries were now fracturing, as each empire sought to protect itself from the threat they now believed was lurking in every shadow. The galaxy had been changed irrevocably. The humans' actions had exposed the vulnerabilities of the alien empires, revealing that their power was not as absolute as they had believed. And in doing so, he had demonstrated the true capabilities of humanity, a species that had been underestimated and dismissed, but that had now proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. As the alien commanders stood in the ruins of their plans, they were left to ponder the implications of what had happened. They had captured the human, but at what cost? The galaxy was in disarray, their control slipping through their fingers, and the fear that had once driven them was now consuming them. The human had accomplished his mission, and the consequences of their underestimation would be felt for generations to come. The story ended with the galaxy in a state of uncertainty, the alien empires left to rebuild in the wake of their defeat. But one thing was clear: humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, and the aliens would never again view them as a simple, inferior species. The game had changed, and the galaxy would never be the same.